All right, and welcome. I am Sarah, and this is the lovely Megan Ritchie. Thank you so much for coming. I'm part of Second Renaissance Arts, a creative collective where we bring writers together to celebrate writing and education in all forms. Today we will be talking to Megan Ritchie, our featured writer. I will give up a brief bio. Megan Ritchie is a Michener Fellow at the University of Miami. Her short stories have earned her a Lester Gorin Award for fiction, been shortlisted for the Northwest Review Fiction Contest, and a Meridian Editor's Prize. She's also been anthologies in The Coolest American Short Stories, alongside nominees for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. She is also a Tin House alumni, and she's currently in Scotland. So thank you for coming all the way from Scotland to talk to us today, working on her first novel, generously funded by the Dean Summer Award. So welcome. And this is our first time doing anything really like this for the Summer Featured Writers. And that entails we have so much going on with you, Megan. So I'm really excited to have you on. We're going to be having a masterclass, which the signups are open today. I just found out, so that's really exciting. And it's at secondrenarts.com/masterclass signup. So if you want to be a part of a masterclass with Megan, you can sign up there. It's $25, and that will be on July 28th. So, yeah. And if you want to follow us on all of our social media, there's a banner on the bottom. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you have any questions throughout the interview, please do not hesitate to comment below on either our YouTube channel or our Facebook, and we will try to get them in as quick as we can. All right. So you ready, Megan? I think so. It's so good to see you and talk to you. I know last time that we talked in person, we were in New York at some little bar, and that was so much fun. Why don't we dive in and talk about being a part of the Coolest American Short Stories and the process of working with Mark and Elizabeth, and I hope that they're watching. That would be so much fun. And yeah.
All right. Well, I've got nothing but good things to say about them, obviously. They put together that amazing event at KGB Bar, and they found my story. I think it might have been in spring 2021. They sent out a call to the University of Miami. I submitted and I heard back really quickly, which was really nice because I'm sure you've experienced this too, Sarah, the long waiting periods.
Absolutely.
It's so bad right now. I can't even think about it. But so they found me there, and it was Elizabeth who reached out actually to me first, and then it was Mark's edits. And that's how we got the story in the anthology. And I'm really lucky to be in there. I'm with a really great cohort, I guess I could call them. So it's been really fun. I feel like I've gotten a lot of opportunities through it, like going to New York and Manhattan and, being able to meet people like you, in a different literary community than I'm usually exposed to.
Absolutely. Being a part of the collective we are, it's such a fun experience to go to different locations. It was also my first time going into New York and going to a reading. And it was my first time.
Oh my God, so big moments for both of us.
Yeah. So I've never been to that part of New York before, and the bar was I was a little nervous about it, but it was so interesting. And I know that the KGB bar on Instagram, if anybody wants to look them up, they're really cool, and they're so supportive of the literary community, and they have so many events going on. They have open mics, they have readings, they have workshops from all across genre. So it's really a cool place if you're in New York area to jump into. So Megan, why don't you tell me a little bit about the story? I know I read it a couple times, but I know there's some viewers who have not yet. And I know you'll be reading from it today, so that's really exciting. And the story Good Actors is so complex. It's like every story in this anthology is really interesting. I'm going to hold it up.
Yeah, show it. It's got such a pretty cover.
It's so like drawing, like it like really pulls the eye with all the colors on it.
Yeah.
But all of the stories in this anthology are cool in their own sense. But yours especially, for me, caught my eye. And I remember I was sitting at KGB and I'm listening to you read, and my boyfriend says, "You have a lot of thoughts about this, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes, I absolutely have a lot of thoughts about this." I said, "I gotta go talk to her," because this was such a grabbing story for me. And it really was, there were so many layers to it. And to the point where it was like almost poetic, that I was like, oh, I want to like analyze this and really see where she was coming from and what direction did she start with. So if you can like kind of like talk about the origin, what, how did this happen? How did this become, how was this born?
Well, thank you. That is so nice to hear. Oh my gosh. So I was like working on this mostly during COVID. It was like, I think it was like March 2020 or so is like when I started it. I was really bored. I was looking for things to do. I wrote so much during that period. And like, this is the only story I think that has gone anywhere.
Oh, wow.
During that time. But I had just come off of this like horrible internship. Nothing good to say about it. And it was like in this very glamorous spot. So it was in West Hollywood. It was like right off of Sunset. Like, and anytime I told people this, they would be like blown away by the glamour of it, because it sounds really like glamorous. But it's like this strip mall kind of building, like on the boulevard. And it was a PR company. And we talked a lot about like our clients and how to portray our clients and the narratives we had to build around them. And I was really surprised when the conversation would start to turn to like the client sexuality. Like there was this whole thing where, and this is like a phenomenon I've kind of heard about from my acting friends too, but there's kind of this idea in Hollywood, it seems like, where it's kind of thought that men need to be portrayed as like heterosexual, because the only way they bring in female audiences is through women's attraction to them. And it's this really weird thing. And this was happening in like West Hollywood, which is a famous district, for like its drag brunches, like just this whole culture there. And this is in Los Angeles. This is in California. This is like maybe one of the most liberated places you could think of. And we were having these conversations about like portraying our clients dishonestly. And it was just so disheartening to me. And also, of course, there's like that doubling of acting, right? Where it's like, we have to kind of portray this like dishonesty about clients in order to get them acting gigs and things like that. And it was so strange to me, and it bothered me a lot that I was a part of it. And at the same time, I'm like in my little cubicle, like miserable, watching out the window as people are like coming in and out of like a drag spot. And so I was thinking a lot about like the kinds of people who are coming in and out of that. And that's how I got one of the scenes for this story. And that kind of became like the focal point for me for the story, which is about an actor who's struggling with his sexuality in Los Angeles. And that's where it all kind of began.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's wild how like jobs really pull just things out of you. And, even like thinking about working in higher education and how there are elements of some jobs where you're just like, I don't know how this is even a thing, like, and I unfortunately have to be a part of that, because in order to stay, like, whether you're in an internship, whether you're in a job, whether, you're too low on the totem pole to make any kind of noise either. So that's really, I'm glad that you wrote the story, because not only are you highlighting something, when I read it, I was like, wow, like I left that reading and I was like, wow, like as an actor, like what does it mean to be a genuine person? If you're an actor, like, or if you're dating an actor, like what character are you per se dating, quote unquote? And like, I thought that was like a wild concept because like I've never dated anybody who was an actor, but I know a lot of actors, and like thinking about that in terms of like are they playing a role or are they not playing a role? I thought that was just like a wild like thought that I've never, and I love reading something and like having a new idea. Like I'm like, oh, I wish I thought of that first.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always like writing about acting like a little bit, just because I feel like it's very similar to writing in a lot of ways, at least literary fiction. I don't know if you feel that way at all, but I feel like there's so much of this talk and workshop about like getting into characters' heads. And I've always felt like that acting is really akin to that. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Absolutely. When I teach my fiction classes here at Second Renaissance, I always have them do a character sketch. And I always say, like, become friends with your characters because they have to become like real people. And whether you're like having dinner with your character and I'll have them like write the scene, or just like drawing the picture, or finding someone on the internet that sort of looks like your character makes them come alive. And it's that same way of like getting either into the character's head or like becoming friends with this like not real person. Like a crazy person when you're just like having dinner by yourself and talking.
No. What we do is so weird. Like if you think about it for more than like 10 seconds, you kind of have to just stop because your brain breaks a little.
That was a good segue because I actually was going to ask you, like, what was your process when writing good actors? Because if you were you said you were in COVID, and like I feel like a lot of writers either wrote a lot during COVID, or was just like the factory was shut down, like that was it. No writing until we go back to civilization. So I'm curious what your process was on that.
Yeah, I had like a few like lines here and there jotted down from like when I was working, like when I was at the office, and I was just looking for something to do at that point because it was just like this was my senior year at USC, and like I was just taking these classes in my bedroom and I just needed to do something in between them. And so I pulled it out and I just started working on it. I think just kind of in like that, and just looking for something to do, honestly, with my time. I think it was just that, like, and then the way I write is I always tend to like write a little bit out of order. And I think it shows in a lot of my writing. You might see it in this story. So a lot of the process of writing was like rearranging passages and figuring out the structure, and revising too. It was like one of the first stories I brought to my MFA workshop. So I got helpful feedback there. And so it ended up being like almost a year of revisions, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah, I know, right?
That's why. That's a lot of revisions.
It is, and I hate revision with my whole heart. So like, it says something.
Who doesn't? I mean, I like revision in some ways because it's sort of like you said, like rearranging. And I too also write out of order. I'm in the process of also writing I'm writing a memoir right now, and everything I'm writing is out of order. Like I'm just like writing, and if I write in a linear sense, it's just not gonna work. So I totally was resonating with that because I'm like, if I had to write linear, it would just be like not fun. Like I want to write the end first.
Oh my God, I'm so glad there's more of us. I've never met anybody else who writes that way, and I'm like, it's got to be a thing. Like writing linear. How do you say that? Linearly. It's linear. Like so difficult. Yeah, it's not as fun. I always want to write the fun parts first.
Yeah, because you know them and you get excited. At least I get so excited, and then like my notebooks are just full of stuff. It's just like line in the slant of like, oh wait, I got to write that down. Or I also was going to ask you, because you were in sort of that space to get that inspiration. Did you do any like outside research in terms of sexuality, and were you intending it? I know you were saying that you were going to talk about like, sexuality, but were you intending it on being like a coming out story?
I wasn't at first, like not at all. And then it just turned out that way. And I did do a lot of research. Like I was just really curious if this was like a phenomenon, or if this was just that I happened to be in this like weird segment of LA where this happens. But I ended up reading a lot of articles. Apparently, this is a big thing out in New York as well. I think it's just anywhere like with a film industry, it's really normal, which is again interesting. Like LA, New York, not two places where you think that would happen. So I did research on that, and then I was talking to a lot of my friends who were in acting. Um, and I didn't do too much research on like the industry itself, just because I felt like I knew a decent amount just by like osmosis, just by being in LA and like at USC. And that was about it for me. That was kind of how I got started on that research.
Oh, cool. It's so interesting. I mean, I'm from New Jersey, but I live pretty close to New York, and that whole film aspect of like even the people who work in film, they have a different mindset of like what it means to be a storyteller.
Yes, completely.
And I love that you sort of bridge this gap between like who you are as a person, as an actor, versus who you are as a person, as a storyteller. And I thought that was such a really cool aspect of the story, which I was just, all the stories in this anthology, I feel like they dive you into these worlds, and you are just immersed in the world. You are in the trance of the world that the author has put you in until you are now into another world when you get to the next story, which I find that so inspiring. And the fact that Mark and Elizabeth has strung all these authors together who are sort of doing the same thing as to bringing the reader into the world that is so unknown to them. I was reading the anthology while sitting on the beach, and I was no longer on the beach. Like, I was in LA. And that's awesome to me. Because then you look up and you see the ocean, and I'm like, this isn't the wrong ocean. So I think that just the idea of really focusing on setting, which I know that for your master class, that's what you'll be really focusing on as well. If you want to talk about that a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this masterclass. So I love thinking about setting in all of my writing. I feel like that's really where all of my stories start, just because I don't know, I think that place has such an impact on who we are as people and the decisions we make. And so it just seems so important to me to get that down on paper first, and to have setting push back against the characters in some ways, like the way that LA does with Drew, who's the protagonist in that story. So in this masterclass, I'm excited because we'll be reading some great examples of stories that do this. So A Temporary Matter by Jhumpa Lahiri. The setting there is very quiet. It's more suburban. But it's nice to look at the house that this conflict between a married couple is set in and see how it pushes them as well. And then we'll also be looking at Kaiming Chang, who also, I think she has a short story collection out today in the US. So a little plug for her. Yeah, but we'll be reading one of her micros as well. And it's set in Half Moon Bay, which is also near where I grew up. So I'm excited for this. I can see the setting a little bit. Yeah, I'm so excited for it. I think it's going to be great too to hear from the students. I always really appreciate that part of workshops because I get so much out of that. They always have insights I don't have. So
yeah, that's what I love about teaching creative writing. I feel like I learn more from them than they learn from me. And then I'll get a phone call from somebody that were like, I've been thinking about this since I left the class. It's like 3 days later. And I'm like, that warms my heart. But then I'm like, also when I get the story back, whatever they're writing, I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm talking about their story for 2-3 days. So it's this give and take. And I love being part of this world where you're just inspired by other people's imagination. But also I wanted to ask you too, how did you start? What inspired you to write? Are there authors that you kind of gravitated towards when starting out? And is there any advice you can give to new writers that are just starting out?
Okay, so I'm one of those, I feel like writers fall into one of two categories. They either start writing like as far back they can remember or in their 20s. Like it's one or the other. And so I'm the first group. I just started writing when I was really little. I had like highlight magazines. Do you remember those? Like
Yes.
back in the olden days, and we had like actual magazines.
Yes.
They would have stories in the back, and I loved them. And then like I had the epiphany that I could also write. Like that was something that was open to me. So I've just been writing since, and always fiction. And the writers that I gravitate towards are, it's so hard. It's such a tricky question. There's so many good ones. I really like very clean, simple writing. I just really like when the attention is on like individual words themselves and you can really hear the beauty of the language. So who have I been reading lately? Been reading Louise Kennedy, who's an Irish writer who's really fantastic. I just read Happy Hour by Marlo Granados. It's a debut, which is always exciting. I'm always looking at debuts. And Lisa Taddeo, I think is how her last name is said. I'm not totally sure. But those are some that I've been reading lately.
Lisa Taddeo, that rings a bell for me.
Yeah, she's super well known. It's she did, the one I read was Animal, and then she also has Three Woman, and I'm sure there's one or two others that I'm just blanking on.
I've heard of Animal, definitely. I mean, I always have those newsletters of all like new books coming out, and I follow a few publishers and things like that. So, but any recommendations are good. I'm always trying to find more books to fill the bookshelves because I have like this much time to read. But in terms of new books, you're writing a novel. So that's
thank you, yeah.
And I'm so excited. When you're ready, to please send it over. I would love to read it.
Hopefully soon.
Yes, please. I would love to. And you're in Scotland, which is I know we talked earlier that's going to be the setting of your novel. So that's so interesting. And if you can like talk about that, like being in that world, that must be like another world. Yeah.
It's set in Edinburgh, and I'm in Edinburgh. I'm like looking out the window, like at the skyline right now. It's very pretty.
Oh my goodness.
And I kind of looked out because I managed to get like funding through the university for this like specific project because I'm really interested in like kind of the independence movement that's happening here, and also how that is kind of juxtaposed against what is happening in the US. So the novel that I'm writing takes place summer 2019. So it's against the backdrop of Brexit, and it's following this woman who has a Scottish mother who's ill. The daughter, the protagonist, Anna, she goes to Scotland to kind of try and figure out this troubled relationship she has with her mother. And she decides to donate her eggs in Scotland as this way of tying herself more to the country. She's really struggling with identity, things like that. And that's kind of the crux of the novel. Just really interested in all things having to do with reproduction, reproductive rights, especially right now. I'm finding that unfortunately, like the novel's a little more timely than I would want it to be. So yeah, and it's been really great like being here and being able to really write to it, because I am coming at this as an American. I'm trying to avoid doing the American goes abroad trope in my writing. So it's helpful to actually like be here and be talking to people in politics and like going to readings and things like that. I actually, just before this, I was at a reading at this great bookstore called Lighthouse, and it was like about abolishing borders. There was this book that just came out, and so I got to hear from some British folks on the topic of like independence and nationality and different things like that. And so it's been nice being able to do that. Seeing family here as well has been really nice. It kind of helps like ground me a little bit more here, because I'm not just playing tourist, or I am, but at least I'm being guided by people who actually know their way around. So
Absolutely.
that's what I've been up to.
That's so awesome. So let me just ask you, so, like, if you don't mind. So, what sort of got you inspired to write this novel? And why? I know that you said that, like, centering around like reproduction. Like,
Yeah.
what was the reason behind that? I know that there's a lot of people talking about that, and then there's also some people not talking about like reproductiveness in work. I know that there's a lot of boundaries. Alicia Oysterker, who's a poet, she was writing about reproductive and childbirth very early on, like the 70s, I guess 60s,
Wow.
70s. And like there was a lot of pushback. And then there's also like people who celebrated this too. So do you worry about that? And what was your reasoning behind it?
Yeah. So as to the like writing to womanhood, I feel like we're in this trend right now where there's like a lot of mothers talking about their experience of motherhood. And so I'm kind of wanting to take this novel from like a little bit before that happens and like what does that decision mean? Because I feel like it's kind of one that as women we're asked to make really early on in our lives. Um, so I'm not too worried about pushback there. And as for how this came to me, I was in Edinburgh last summer and there were a lot of COVID restrictions happening. And it was really interesting to see how national identity there was really splintering because people were going back to, just like in the US, people were kind of going back home. They were going back to their parents' houses and things like that. And it became really difficult for like British expatriates to come back to the country. And it felt like this real reorganization of the space of Great Britain. Um, and it was just so interesting to see this as someone who doesn't really have their skin in the game and can kind of look at it as like a true outsider. And so watching that all happen, I was just jotting things down, things like here and there. And then it wasn't until I got back to Miami and was like almost a semester into my program that I started thinking that maybe there was a novel there. And, you know, same as with stories, like short stories, I write out of order. So I wasn't even sure if it was like a full novel because I was just writing these little vignettes at first. And now I'm at like 60,000 words. So it is looking like a novel. But that is how I started, kind of sporadic writing style.
That's amazing. And I finding the seed of a story is so incredible. That just happened to me, which I've never had this happen to me in my life. So like finding the seed or like entering the setting where you're like, oh my God, like this is it. And like you haven't written anything yet, but you're like, oh, I have to come back here and I have to like
It's such a good feeling.
oh my God, it's like euphoric. I was like taking
Mhm.
a million pictures. I have a million pictures of like the setting that like
Yeah.
like and people like going through my phone like what are these pictures of a library for? And I'm just like there's a story there. There's a story there.
No,
So like
we get it. We're both in the same boat.
absolutely. So has your family inspired any parts of the book, and how is that going with your writing? Like can you switch gears or are they sort of part of your process? Like I know they say you said that they ground you, but are they kind of part of the writing process?
No, so there's like no characters in there or anything like based on them. They're just helping me get a better sense of like um what the culture I think is because Americans tend to have this really romanticized idea of Scotland, I think. And so it's right, like it's such a thing. Like I live right by a spot. It's a I'm right in the most touristy area of Edinburgh. And so right below me is this shop that's like discover your clan heritage, like find your pardons, like really cheesy. And so I think that's kind of the idea of Scotland that Americans have in their head is like,
The Disney
going,
version.
yes, going back and finding their ancestors and things like that. And so it's nice to be reminded that like no real people live here. It's not like this fantasy lands. Like there's so much more to it than that, than being this place that people came from. Which is actually I think that's part of what I'm trying to push my protagonist Anna to recognize is she's kind of going into it with this idea like my mother's from here, like this is the motherland, like these cheesy ideas of
Yeah.
like belonging. And so being able to hear from my family and how they view Americans and how they might view me has been helpful. And, making this more of a critique of Anna's line of thinking than, endorsing it.
Interesting. That's so funny that you're living under living above a like.
Every time I pass it, I just I crack up a little bit because it's just I've never seen any tourists go in there though. So I don't know how effective that marketing is, but it's there.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your process, and I'm so glad that you got to be here and discuss this, and I'm so glad that we met. This really has been such a fun relationship that we have now. And thank you, Mark and Elizabeth, for bringing us together because, I wouldn't have met you if I didn't go to that thing.
It just takes one thing to bring writers together. It's great.
Yes, thank God for stories. And you said you're in the University of Miami, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I'm doing my upcoming year is going to be my last one. It's my third.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, me too. I'll be finishing too in May as well. So what are your plans post MFA? And then I have a few fun questions for you after that.
Ooh, okay. Post MFA, I am trying to move to the UK. So hopefully I'll be back here in some way. I'm applying to PhDs and things like that because I love being a student and I don't ever want to stop being a student. Yeah, you get it.
Yeah, life for forever.
Exactly. So that's what I'm working on. And then when I go back to Miami, it's going to be I'm hoping to have a full rough draft of this novel. It's not a good rough draft, but it's a rough draft. So hopefully that third year, I'll be able to really revise and get it polished, something I can actually send out to agents and feel good about. So that's my plans.
Awesome. And Mark said, "You're welcome. It was a great interview. Thank you."
Oh, it's so cute.
Love it. I love that. I love this community. It's so fabulous. So I just went to Rosemont College for a writer's retreat, and I went to a few readings, and the host who was doing the reading, she got these questions from Stephen Colbert, and I thought that they were fabulous because I feel like people forget that writers are human beings and not just this grand of all creative knowledge. So I have some funny questions. I hope you're ready.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one, and there are no wrong answers, but favorite action movie?
Oh my God, that's so hard.
I know.
Probably Kingsman. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. That definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. That did not count was what's that? Oh my God, I just lost it. The one that's a Christmas movie.
Oh, it has. Oh my God.
The guy with the bald head.
Know this.
This is gonna upset me. Hold on.
Somebody's gonna say it.
Yeah, hold on.
It's a really good one though. My sister's always trying to get us to watch it at Christmas.
Oh my God, I can't remember. I'm having a moment. We'll get back to this.
So iconic. It's
my boyfriend's gonna watch this and be like, "Are you kidding me? You couldn't remember this?" We'll get back to it. It's right. Oh, not Home Alone. Close though. That is not an action movie, Charlotte.
I love that though.
Oh my God, it's right here. But whatever. We'll get back to it. All right. Next one. Best sandwich.
Can I just say peanut butter and jelly? I know that's so basic.
Classic. Oh, we got it. Hold on.
Oh.
Die Hard. Thank you, Charlotte.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Charlotte. Save the day. So peanut butter and jelly. I am impressed because that's a tried and true classic. But I also didn't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich until I was 23 years old. So
explain that.
I don't know.
What I lived on as a kid.
I like salami sandwiches on white bread. I was just full Italian. There was no.
Okay, that makes sense. Your tastes were too sophisticated for me.
Yeah, so I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at 23 years old. I was like, wow, like this is fabulous. Like, why didn't I do this as a child? And then now, like, my mom will have peanut butter every night. So, like, that every day. So it's so funny. Like, I'm like, oh, like, we could have been doing this. It could have been a lot cheaper, too. Like,
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
right? All right, last one. And then I would love if you could read from
Okay.
your story. All right, if you could listen to one song for the rest of your life on repeat, what would it be and why?
This is really high stakes.
There's no wrong answers.
Oh my gosh.
Unless it's like
Okay.
Eye of the Tiger, which is like the worst song of all time.
Okay, I have been listening to this on repeat, and I think everybody else has been too, but Brazil by Declan McKenna.
Okay, I've never,
You've
unless
heard
I've
it.
heard, I
I
have.
feel like it's been everywhere. You probably just don't know the name.
Exactly. I'm gonna write it down and listen to it on the way home.
Yeah. You're gonna text me and you're gonna tell me that you have heard this a million times before. But yeah, that one's good. I've practically been listening to it all the time anyway, so.
That and the like, what is that? The not the like, what is it? The glass animals or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's on repeat all
Heat
the time.
Wave?
What? Yes,
So
that's on.
good.
That's
Yeah,
on
that one is
repeat.
definitely that's my
All
driving playlist one.
I have a driving playlist too. Positive vibes only is my playlist.
Yes. Good. Love that for you.
Yes, thank you. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for this. I love to. I could talk to you all day though, Megan. Like this is so
Yeah, me
much fun.
too.
But I would love for you to read from your story, and if anybody wants to sign up for the masterclass, it is live right now on secondrentarts.com/masterclass sign up. And if you have any questions for Megan, you can talk to her then, or you can also comment on any of the social media. Please follow us on social media at Second Renaissance Arts, on Facebook, Instagram. I have a Twitter now, which is exciting. And Megan, where can we find you?
Okay, so my website is megan-ritchie.com. My first name is Megan, the least amount of letters possible in that name. Last name Ritchie, Ritchie. Twitter, I'm same thing except it's an underscore between my first and last name, not a hyphen. And that's pretty much all the social media I'm on.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we are looking forward to hearing you read.
All right. Okay. So there are five incidents, of which this was the first. In 2 days' time, she was going to have sex with someone else. Also, it would be televised. She told him this, clever, in the morning while they were still in bed. But don't worry, she said, stretching from her pillow to kiss his cheek. It's acting. There'll be a thing strapping it down. And cameras everywhere. Very unromantic, very unsexy. Morning light leached the color from their bedroom, which was also the kitchen, which was also the living room. It was cluttered with half-dead plants, stolen from parties in the hill, and dishes undone. The face of a long-forgotten star looked down at him from a movie poster, toted from his childhood bedroom in Michigan. You're quiet, Drew, she said. What's the issue? Are you jealous of him? Maybe, he said, kind of. No, I don't think that's it. Is he attractive? Not to me, but it's not like you need to be attracted to someone to have sex with them. Yeah, he said. You're right. I know, said Lainey, and moved her body on top of his. In the small box of their apartment, stacked between hundreds of others, a pinpoint in Silver Lake, his head dampened the pillows. He looked to the ceiling, textured white, and thought of the things he was keeping from Lainey. He thought of the things he was keeping from himself. And he thought, lastly, of Mateo. And it wasn't that he was jealous. He hadn't been lying when he'd said that. He'd instead been thinking of the night he'd met Lainey at some godforsaken bar, club, in downtown LA. The room was dank and smelled of the dorms he'd lived in back in Michigan. Sweat, weed. It was steaming with college students, one of whom Mateo had already slipped away with to some dark corner. Lovely Mateo, who told him he had talent after seeing him in just one show of A Midsummer Night's Dream in the dingy university theater, who'd encouraged him to come out west. It's all happening here, man. I just know it'll happen for you too. Who allowed the infrequent rent payments, who covered his drinks after every failed audition. My treat, he'd say. And anyway, you'll be able to pay it all back and more one day, right? Now let's find someone to distract you. Drew watched Mateo's body twining with another's from the edges of his eyes. The girl, because she really was only a girl, was saying something in Mateo's neck, and Mateo was laughing, a real laugh. Drew knew the difference. With his eyes squinted shut, his eyelashes tight against his cheeks, the small scar from another drunken night stretching pink. A sting of desire, and Drew looked away, embarrassed and hurt, and feeling old and out of place, although he was only 24. Mateo was his only connection here, and the only connection he cared to have. He could not lose him. And then he saw a dark-haired woman his own age watching too. She was bored, he could tell. She stood in a tight circle with a man and a woman who were talking over her. She stirred her drink with a pinky, sharp nails, downed it all, and then she seemed to feel Drew's gaze on her, her eyes drifting past Mateo and meeting his. Blue. She smiled. Her teeth shone. In the morning at her apartment, the apartment he would move into a year later, he saw that her eyes were brown, not light like he'd thought at first. The contacts were colored. She was also acting. Something fun stirred. That was all. Is everything okay? She said now, her hand popping her head up. He was looking again at the ceiling. A crack ran across it, which he was sure hadn't been there before. Her body was radiating heat. He felt humid, his body a greenhouse, his skin the glass. He shifted away from her. True? The tightness in his chest expanded, a balloon. Tell me about the part, he said. Oh. She smiled wide, her canine showing. It's for a procedural. I'm the victim of a crime. I hook up with a detective. I know it's not very interesting, she said, rolling from her side to her back, but there's a chance they'll make me a recurring love interest, if I do well enough. What is it? He said nothing. You are jealous of him, aren't you? She said. I knew it. Outside, he could hear the slug of the commute, the horns blaring, the foregone glass screech of tires. In the apartment above them, the neighbors were waking too, footsteps moving diagonal. A blunder grounds. I'm not, he said, I promise. Are you jealous that I have a role? That's not it either. I just need to think. About what? Nothing, he said, although it obviously wasn't nothing, but he couldn't quite articulate it yet. I'm fine, really. Are you saying that in the passive-aggressive way or the real way? The real way. I think I just need to go to work. Don't be ridiculous. It's barely 11. I want to run some errands before. She sat up. When will you be back? Late. It's a double shift, he said, and rose to dress. All right. I have a hair appointment. I won't be around anyway. He put on his watch, tucked his phone and wallet into his pockets. Sure you're not upset? He found the keys to the bar. I'm sure, he said. See you later, I guess. He left. He walked to Mulligan's instead of driving. No one was on the sidewalk. Nobody would be at the bar yet either. Nobody would be there for hours still. It was a Saturday, and Angelina's were notoriously late risers. He let himself into the bar and locked the door behind him. His phone vibrated, his mother calling. She had the uncanny ability to sense something wrong, even from across the country. He let it ring. She'd never gotten over the disappointment of having a son who was an actor, or worse yet, was failing to be an actor. Even in high school, when he'd first discovered how much he enjoyed being someone else, full of someone else's wants and needs, she'd refused to go to any of his plays. Their home, a one traffic light town on the thumb of Michigan, was too small, she'd said. There would be gossip, there would be rumors, and she didn't want any part of it. And then when he first moved out to LA, she'd eyed the shambles that had been his and Mateo's first apartment. Can't you do something a little more manly, she'd said, as soon as Mateo had left for downtown. Something a little more respectable? Was that econ degree really for nothing? I only did it for you, he wanted to say, but didn't. So yes, it was for nothing. She forgave him slightly, only when she met Lainey. Lainey had a talent with parents for knowing the right face to put on. She was an LA native, which made her a convincing actress, growing up in a place where every block was a set, every passerby a potential director, or producer, or agent. She did more than believe in a part, even if that part was only potential daughter-in-law. She was the part. It was that which had drawn Drew to her in the first place. Now Drew looked for things to do. Too early still to prep the garnishes, so he dragged over the floor mats and unlocked the coolers and taps. The counters and sink were already gleaming. He went to the storeroom to restock the glasses, and there he realized alone. He was never alone, not in Los Angeles, not in his apartment. There was always an audience. He set down the glasses and thought again of Mateo, whose accounting firm had transferred him back to the Midwest, to Chicago. At least that's what Mateo had said, but Drew suspected it had to do with him. So Mateo had gone back to his hometown friends. Drew saw the pictures of him and his high school girlfriend together again on Instagram, felt that same prick of hurt, and Drew was stranded in Los Angeles where he had only Lainey. He hadn't spoken to Mateo in months. Should he call? But no, he wouldn't call. Instead, he'd let the hours pass and watch the day bruise into night and the bar populate with the faces of men and women and be filled with slow regret. The second thing, less dramatic than the first, but somehow more discomforting. He woke up next to someone else. At least he thought so. He came home late, fell asleep beside the dark shape of her, and woke next to a blonde stranger. And then the woman turned over and it was Lainey again, her hair yellow instead of near black. She's always dyeing her hair different colors for auditions. That wasn't unusual. In the different magazines she'd read when she was young, she told him, this was what all the A-list celebrities reported. They'd taken some sort of risk to demonstrate their dedication to the character. Dyeing their hair to match their characters, or wearing strange clothes, piercing body parts, getting tattoos, anything to make the part less a performance, more an incarnation. It's who we are, Lainey said. We're chameleons. And she was. No matter how many times she dyed her hair, she was always the same person at the end of the day. That was not true of him. Is this for your role? He said. She stirred. What? Not bothering to open her eyes. For it, your part. Oh. She turned over onto her back. Eyes flickered open. They asked me to, yeah. I'm supposed to be a dumb blonde bombshell, something sexist like that. She yawned. He said. Don't tell me this bothers you too. No, it doesn't. Then I still don't get it, she said. I know there's something wrong. You can tell me whatever it is, you know. I can't, he said. I have an audition. The same way you had to run errands? Yes, he said, exactly. The truth, because clearly she knew this was a lie. The last time he'd gone into a waiting room, crowded with men who all looked like him, he decided it really would be the last. The small, slight man, the cropped blonde hair, even the brown eyes, a funhouse of himself. A doctor's office where he was the only patient. He did not like being confronted by himself. One actor across from him, in his cheap plastic chair, had leaned forward and smiled at him. He'd opened his mouth as if to ask a question, and Drew had looked away. And then he got up. The audition was in Beverly Hills, and he left his car, its dented headlight a permanent wink, parked there, and followed Santa Monica Boulevard all the way to West Hollywood. He passed the Abbey, then Mickey's, and finally slowed outside of Hamburger's Mary's. He and Mateo had gone there only once when they'd first moved out here. It's like an initiation, Mateo had said. Where else can you do this shit? But then after, no, I don't think we need to do that again. A drag brunch was happening now. All the doors and windows were open. The tourists were leaning forward at their tables, mimosas forgotten. Drew leaned with them, trying not to imagine his mother at his shoulder. The drag queen was singing something. She was rapt. He knew the feeling, both embodiment and not, a sense of distance from oneself. And then the queen opened her eyes, which landed on him. She smiled, the purple tint of her eyeshadow discoing under the fluorescence. Come on in, honey, she'd said, and then the tourists had all turned to him, their mouths pulled into wide and expectant grins, like he was their newest performance. We've got plenty of room for you. And I'll end there so that we've got a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yes, oh my, that was so great. I was actually following along. It was like so much fun.
So cute. Aww.
Yeah, it was like listening to a book on tape. I loved it. I mean, I wish I followed along the first time you read it because I bought the book prior. Yeah. So like that was fun, but like just like looking down and then like looking up, I'm like, oh, it's like this. It was really exciting. And it always, every time I hear that, the beginning of this is just the best. And it really just brings you into this world, and I love that. But if anybody doesn't have any questions, I'm going to put the little banner up. I will see you at the master class. And
Yes,
again, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. And we could find you at your website and on Twitter. And yeah, well, this is Second Renaissance Arts. This is our summer featured writers series. Megan has graciously been a part of our first one, and then we will have Shannon Frost Greenstein for our next month, and she's a local Philly poet. So just keep an eye on that, and we have a ton more events coming your way throughout the summer, and also our classes will be open. We have our Fiction 1 class in this right now starting. That was last week, and then we also have Fiction 1, Fiction 2, and a nonfiction class being offered in the fall. So if you know anybody who wants to be a part of that, Megan and anybody, please don't hesitate to sign up. And if you have any questions, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Viveka, Vivecca. I am on Twitter the same way. I'm on LinkedIn, which is an awesome one. That's my favorite, my new fave. Facebook, I'm Sarah V. And you could also email me at sarahv@secondranarts.com. So, yeah, well, thank you again, Megan. And this was so much fun.
So good talking to you. I will see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.